The bitter wind whipped across the plains as Dahlia Monroe struggled to keep her shawl wrapped around both herself and her feverish 6-year-old son, whose small body trembled against hers despite the summer heat. The journey from their failed homestead to the nearest town had taken longer than expected, and now, as the sun began its descent behind the rugged mountains of Colorado Territory, 1871, desperation clawed at her heart with each labored breath her child took. "Just a little further, Samuel," Dahlia whispered, her voice cracking as she adjusted him in her arms. Her muscles screamed in protest, but giving up wasn't an option. Not when Samuel's usually rosy cheeks had turned an alarming shade of gray, his skin burning with fever. The dirt road ahead stretched endlessly, and Dahlia's vision blurred with unshed tears. She'd lost her husband to a mining accident 3 months prior, leaving her alone to tend their small homestead and care for their son. But when the well dried up and the crops failed, she'd had no choice but to abandon everything and seek help in Silver Creek, the nearest settlement. Now Samuel's sudden illness threatened to take the only thing she had left in this world. The sound of approaching hoofbeats made her turn, hope and fear mingling in her chest. Travelers on this lonely stretch could mean salvation or danger. The frontier made no promises either way. The rider approached at a steady pace, his broad-shouldered silhouette backlit by the setting sun. Dahlia clutched Samuel tighter and stepped to the side of the road, wariness making her movements stiff. The stranger slowed his chestnut mare as he neared, and Dahlia caught sight of a weathered face beneath the wide brim of his hat. "Madam," he called out, his voice deep but gentle. "You all right there?" Dahlia hesitated, years of frontier caution warring with desperate need. "My son," she finally managed. "He's very ill. I'm trying to reach Silver Creek for the doctor." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, revealing a tall frame clad in dust-covered clothes, a worn leather vest, and a gun belt that had clearly seen use. But it was his eyes that caught Dahlia's attention, despite the hardness that life had carved into the rest of his features. "Silver Creek's still 5 miles out," he said, approaching slowly as if understanding her wariness. "Your boy doesn't look like he'll make it that far on foot." Samuel coughed weakly in her arms, and Dahlia couldn't hold back a sob. "I don't have any other choice." The stranger stepped closer, and in the fading light, she could see the concern etched across his sun-weathered face. "I'm Finn Blackwood," he said, removing his hat in a gesture of respect. "Been working cattle at the Double Creek Ranch these past years." He glanced at Samuel, then back to her with resolve hardening his expression. "We'll see the doctor together. Your boy can ride with me, it'll be faster." Dahlia hesitated, studying his face for any sign of deception. Finding none, she nodded slowly. "I'm Dahlia Monroe. This is my son, Samuel." Finn nodded, replacing his hat. "Let me take him, Mrs. Monroe. We'll get him to Doc Pearson before nightfall." As he reached for Samuel, Dahlia felt the weight of her decision. Trusting a stranger with her child went against everything the frontier had taught her, but Samuel's burning forehead pressed against her neck left no room for hesitation. "Thank you," she whispered, carefully transferring her son's limp form into Finn's strong arms. The cowboy cradled the boy with surprising gentleness, then mounted his horse with practiced ease, keeping Samuel secure against his chest. He extended a hand down to Dahlia. "Come on, now. We'll both fit." Gathering her skirts, Dahlia accepted his help and settled behind him on the horse, her arms encircling both her son and this stranger who had appeared like a miracle on the empty road. "Hold tight," Finn instructed, and with a click of his tongue, the horse began moving at a brisk pace towards Silver Creek. The rhythmic sway of the horse beneath them and the solid warmth of Finn's back against her chest offered Dahlia the first moment of relief she'd felt in days. She sent a silent prayer skyward that they wouldn't be too late, that this stranger's kindness wouldn't have come in vain. As they rode, Samuel's breathing grew more labored, each inhale a struggle that tore at Dahlia's heart. "Faster," she whispered. "Please." Finn needed no further urging. He spurred the horse into a controlled gallop, and Dahlia clung tighter as the landscape blurred around them. The setting sun cast long shadows across the prairie as they raced against time itself. "Silver Creek's just beyond that rise," Finn said over his shoulder. "Doc Pearson's place is on the east end of town. Good man. Patched me up more than once." True to his word, within minutes the silhouettes of buildings appeared on the horizon, a welcome sight after miles of empty prairie. Lights twinkled in windows as dusk settled over the town, and the sounds of civilization voices, a piano from the saloon, the distant bark of dogs reached them as they approached. Finn guided his horse directly to a modest clapboard building with a small sign identifying it as the doctor's office. Before they had fully stopped, he was dismounting with Samuel carefully held against his chest. "Doc Pearson," he called out, striding to the door and pushing it open without ceremony. Dahlia scrambled down from the horse and hurried after them, her legs unsteady after the hard ride. Inside, a silver-haired man looked up from his desk, spectacles perched on his nose. He took in the situation with one glance and quickly cleared a table covered with papers. "Bring him here," he instructed, already rolling up his sleeves. "What happened?" As Finn laid Samuel on the table, Dahlia rushed to her son's side. "Fever started yesterday. He was weak this morning. Then the coughing began. It's gotten worse by the hour." The doctor's practiced hands moved over Samuel, checking his pulse, feeling his forehead, listening to his chest with a stethoscope. His expression remained neutral, but his movements grew more urgent. "Pneumonia, from what I can tell. The boy's lungs are congested." He looked up at Dahlia. "How long has he been like this?" "The fever's been high since this morning," she answered, wringing her hands. "We've been traveling, our homestead failed, and I was bringing him to town when he fell ill." Dr. Pearson nodded, then turned to gather bottles from a nearby cabinet. "I need to make a mustard plaster for his chest and get some medicine into him to break the fever. It'll be a long night." He glanced at Finn, who stood like a sentinel near the door. "Good thing you brought them in when you did, Blackwood. Another hour and I might not have been able to help." Finn simply nodded, his expression grim as he watched the small boy fighting for breath on the table. "You can wait outside if you'd like," the doctor said to him as he began mixing ingredients in a bowl. "This may take some time." To Dahlia's surprise, Finn shook his head. "I'll stay if it's all right." His eyes met hers briefly. "Unless you'd rather I go, Mrs. Monroe." The unexpected offer of continued support made Dahlia's throat tighten with emotion. "Please stay," she managed. "And it's just Miss Monroe now. My husband passed earlier this year." Something shifted in Finn's expression, understanding, perhaps, or a shared familiarity with loss. He nodded once and settled into a chair in the corner, removing his hat and placing it on his knee. The next hours passed in a blur of anxious waiting as Dr. Pearson worked to reduce Samuel's fever and ease his breathing. Dahlia sat beside her son, applying cool cloths to his forehead, while the doctor prepared medications and treatments. Finn remained quietly in his corner, occasionally stepping out to tend to his horse or fetch fresh water when needed, but always returning to his vigil. It was well past midnight when Samuel's fever finally broke, his breathing becoming less labored. Dr. Pearson straightened his tired back and nodded with satisfaction. "He's turned the corner, I believe," he said, patting Dahlia's shoulder. "Not out of danger yet, but the worst has passed. You should both get some rest." Dahlia shook her head, unwilling to leave her son's side. "I'll stay with him. There's a cot in the back room," the doctor offered. "I can watch the boy while you sleep." "I can keep an eye on him too," Finn spoke up from his corner. You need rest, Miss Monroe. Won't do your boy any good if you fall ill yourself. Dahlia hesitated, exhaustion tugging at every limb. After a moment, she nodded. Just for a little while, then, Dr. Pearson showed her to the small back room where a narrow cot stood against the wall. I'll wake you if there's any change, he promised. Dahlia lay down, intending only to rest her eyes for a moment. Instead, the accumulated exhaustion of days of worry and travel crashed over her, pulling her into a deep sleep. When she woke with a start, sunlight was streaming through the small window. Panic seized her as she remembered Samuel, and she rushed back to the main room, only to find her son sitting up on the examination table, looking pale but alert. Finn sat beside him, apparently in the middle of telling a story that had brought a small smile to Samuel's face. Mama! Samuel called weakly when he saw her, his voice hoarse but wonderfully alive. Dahlia rushed to him, gathering him into her arms as tears of relief flooded her eyes. Oh, my brave boy, she whispered against his hair. Over Samuel's shoulder, her eyes met Finn's. The cowboy stood, a smile softening his weathered features. Doc says he's doing much better. Fever's gone completely. Dr. Pearson entered from the front door, carrying a tray with several steaming mugs. Ah, you're awake. Good. I've brought some broth for the boy and coffee for the adults. He set the tray down and handed a mug to Finn. Blackwood here hasn't left all night. Kept watch while I caught a few hours sleep myself. Dahlia looked at Finn with new appreciation. You stayed the whole night? He shrugged, suddenly appearing uncomfortable with the attention. Wanted to make sure the boy pulled through. Thank you, Dahlia said, the simple words inadequate for the depth of her gratitude. For everything. Finn nodded, then turned to the doctor. What's the plan now, Doc? How long before the boy can travel? Dr. Pearson stroked his beard thoughtfully. He'll need at least a week of rest before I'd recommend any travel, and even then, nothing strenuous. The lungs need time to heal properly. Reality crashed back onto Dahlia's shoulders. A week in town meant paying for lodging, food, and the doctor's services expenses she hadn't planned for with her meager savings. But there was no choice. Samuel's health came first. Is there a boarding house in town? She asked, trying to keep the worry from her voice. Mrs. Wilson's place on Pine Street, Dr. Pearson answered. But she charges $2 a night, meals extra. Dahlia's heart sank. At that rate, her small purse of coins wouldn't last 3 days. Finn must have read the concern on her face. Miss Monroe, he said, setting down his coffee. The Double Creek Ranch where I work is just outside town. The owner, Mr. Hollister, is a fair man with a good-sized house. His wife passed years back, but they've got a housekeeper who keeps the place running. I'm sure they could use help with cooking and such, in exchange for a room for you and your boy while he recovers. Hope flickered in Dahlia's chest. You think he would agree to that? I can ask him today, Finn offered. He's been talking about needing more help around the house since Mrs. Abernathy's been feeling her age lately. Dr. Pearson nodded approvingly. The Hollister place would be perfect. Good clean air out there, and not too far if the boy needs to see me again. Dahlia looked down at Samuel, who was already looking stronger after just a few spoonfuls of broth. The offer presented not just immediate shelter but perhaps a longer-term solution to their predicament. Still, accepting charity didn't come easily to her. I wouldn't want to impose, she began. It's not imposing if you're working, Finn countered gently. And from what I can see, you're not a woman afraid of hard work. The observation, delivered without flattery or condescension, touched something in Dahlia. No, she agreed softly. I'm not. Then it's settled, Finn said, placing his hat back on his head. I'll ride out to speak with Mr. Hollister now and come back with an answer by noon. In the meantime, you and the boy rest here." Before Dahlia could thank him again, he was gone, his tall frame disappearing through the door with long, purposeful strides. Dr. Pearson chuckled as he checked Samuel's pulse. "That's Blackwood for you. Man of few words but good actions." "You know him well?" Dahlia asked, curious about the quiet cowboy who had so drastically altered their fortunes. "Well enough," the doctor replied. "Been in Silver Creek about 5 years now. Keeps to himself mostly, but he's respected. Honest worker, good with horses. Had a rough go of it before landing at Double Creek, from what I gather, but he doesn't talk about it much." Dahlia nodded, filing away this information as she helped Samuel with another spoonful of broth. Whatever Finn Blackwood's past might be, his present actions had saved her son's life and possibly their future as well. True to his word, Finn returned just before noon, his horse kicking up dust as he rode back into town. When he entered the doctor's office, his expression was lighter than before. "Mr. Hollister says you're welcome at Double Creek," he announced without preamble. "He's offering room and board plus a small wage in exchange for cooking and helping Mrs. Abernathy with the household duties." Relief washed over Dahlia. "That's very generous." "He's also sending a wagon to transport you and the boy," Finn continued. "Should be here within the hour." Dr. Pearson clapped his hands together. "Excellent. I'll prepare some medicine for you to take along, and instructions for the boy's care." As the doctor busied himself gathering supplies, Finn approached Samuel's bedside. "How you feeling, partner?" Samuel, who had been quiet around this tall stranger, offered a shy smile. "Better, sir. Thank you for helping us." Finn's face softened as he regarded the boy. "You're a tough one. Reminded me of myself at your age." "Were you sick too?" Samuel asked. "Once or twice," Finn replied. "But I had a good mother like yours to see me through it." The simple compliment brought warmth to Dahlia's cheeks. "We're in your debt, Mr. Blackwood." "Finn," he corrected gently. "And there's no debt. Anyone would have done the same." But Dahlia knew better. The frontier was often a harsh place where survival took precedence over charity. Not everyone would have stopped for a desperate woman and her sick child on a lonely road. True to Finn's word, a wagon arrived shortly after, driven by an older ranch hand who introduced himself as Hank. With careful movements, they settled Samuel on a makeshift bed of blankets in the wagon's bed, with Dahlia beside him. "I'll ride alongside," Finn told her as he mounted his horse. "It's not far, but the road's a bit rough in places." The journey to Double Creek Ranch took less than an hour, but it revealed to Dahlia a glimpse of what might become their new home. The ranch sprawled across a valley cradled by gentle hills, with a creek winding through pastureland where cattle grazed. A substantial 2-story house stood at the center of the property, flanked by a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings that spoke of a prosperous operation. As they approached, a man emerged from the main house, tall and straight-backed despite his years, with silver hair and a neatly trimmed beard. Martin Hollister watched their approach with keen eyes, his weathered face impassive until the wagon drew to a stop before the house. "Mr. Hollister," Finn called out respectfully as he dismounted. "This is Miss Dahlia Monroe and her son Samuel." The rancher approached the wagon, his expression softening as he took in the pale child and his worried mother. "Welcome to Double Creek, Miss Monroe. Finn here tells me you're handy in a kitchen." "Yes, sir," Dahlia replied, straightening her shoulders despite her exhaustion. "And I can clean, so garden whatever's needed." Hollister nodded approvingly. "Good. Mrs. Abernathy will appreciate the help." He turned toward the house and called, "Mrs. Abernathy, our new guests have arrived." A plump, gray-haired woman appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on her apron. Her face creased with concern when she saw Samuel. Oh, the poor dear. Bring him inside right away. With Finn's help, Dahlia carried Samuel into the house, following Mrs. Abernathy up the stairs to a small but clean bedroom at the end of the hallway. This can be the boys' room, the housekeeper explained, turning down the covers on a narrow bed. And there's a connecting door to a smaller room that will be yours, miss. Used to be the nursery back when. Her voice trailed off, and Dahlia caught a shadow of old grief pass across the woman's face. It's perfect, Dahlia assured her, carefully laying Samuel on the bed. The boy's eyes were already drooping with exhaustion from the journey. Mrs. Abernathy nodded briskly, visibly pulling herself together. I'll bring up some soup for the boy when he wakes. You rest too, miss. You look dead on your feet. We can talk about duties tomorrow. After the housekeeper left, Dahlia sank onto the edge of Samuel's bed, the events of the past 24 hours finally catching up to her. A soft knock at the door made her look up to find Finn standing in the doorway, hat in hand. Just wanted to make sure you were settling in all right, he said. We are, thanks to you, Dahlia replied. I don't know how to repay such kindness. Finn shifted, clearly uncomfortable with her gratitude. No need for that. I should get back to work. We're branding calves this week. He hesitated, then added, I'll check in on the boy when I can. Before Dahlia could respond, he was gone, his boot steps fading down the hallway. She turned back to Samuel, who had fallen asleep, his breathing deeper and more regular than it had been in days. For the first time since her husband's death, Dahlia allowed herself to feel a flicker of hope. Perhaps this unexpected detour would lead them to the home and security they so desperately needed. The next morning, Dahlia woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, confusion gripped her until she remembered the events that had brought them to Double Creek Ranch. She quickly checked on Samuel in the adjoining room and found him sleeping peacefully, his fever completely gone. After washing and dressing, she made her way downstairs to find Mrs. Abernathy already bustling about the kitchen, the smell of coffee and bacon filling the air. Good morning, miss. The housekeeper greeted her. How's the boy? Much better, thank you, Dahlia replied, rolling up her sleeves. Please, let me help with breakfast. Mrs. Abernathy regarded her for a moment, then nodded. Bread needs slicing, and the eggs want scrambling. We feed the ranch hands breakfast and dinner here in the main house. Lunch they take with them out to the range. Dahlia set to work, grateful for the familiar tasks that kept her hands busy and her mind occupied. As she worked alongside Mrs. Abernathy, she learned more about Double Creek Ranch and its occupants. Mr. Hollister built this place with his wife, Elizabeth, nearly 30 years ago, the housekeeper explained as she flipped bacon in a large cast-iron skillet. They had one daughter, Catherine, sweet as could be. But we lost both Elizabeth and Catherine to scarlet fever 15 years back. Hit the master hard. He never remarried, just threw himself into building the ranch. I'm sorry to hear that, Dahlia said softly, understanding all too well the hollow space grief could carve inside a person. He's a good man, though. Fair employer. Treats his hands well. Mrs. Abernathy lowered her voice slightly. That Finn Blackwood now. He's been a blessing to this place. Showed up 5 years ago looking half dead himself, but Mr. Hollister saw something in him. Now he's practically foreman, though he'd never claim the title. Before Dahlia could inquire further about Finn, the kitchen door swung open and ranch hands began filing in for breakfast, their voices and laughter filling the previously quiet space. Mr. Hollister entered from the dining room, nodding a greeting to Dahlia. Good morning, Miss Monroe. I trust you and your boy slept well. Very well, thank you, Mr. Hollister, she replied. Samuel's much improved this morning. Glad to hear it. He accepted a cup of coffee from Mrs. Abernathy. Once he's recovered, perhaps he'd like to help around the stables. Boys his age usually enjoy being around the horses. The kindness of the offer, not just considering her employment but thinking of Samuel's happiness as well, touched Dahlia deeply. That's very kind. He would love that. Breakfast was a lively affair, with a dozen hungry ranch hands devouring everything placed before them. Dahlia worked alongside Mrs. Abernathy, refilling coffee cups and bringing out fresh platters of food. She noticed Finn seated at the far end of the table, quieter than the others but occasionally joining in their banter. Once or twice, she caught him watching her, his expression unreadable before he quickly looked away. After the men had filed out to begin their day's work, Dahlia brought a tray upstairs for Samuel, who was awake and already looking stronger. He ate with surprising appetite, and by afternoon was asking if he could get out of bed. Not yet, Dahlia told him firmly. Doctor's orders. But maybe tomorrow you can sit by the window for a little while. The days fell into a pattern. Dahlia rose early to help with breakfast, then spent the morning assisting Mrs. Abernathy with household chores, laundry, cleaning, baking bread. In the afternoons, she tended to Samuel, whose recovery progressed steadily under her care and the clean country air. By the third day, he was well enough to sit on the porch swing, watching the activities of the ranch with fascination. It was on the fifth day, as Dahlia hung laundry on the line behind the house, that Finn approached her directly for the first time since their arrival. He dismounted from his horse, removing his hat as he neared. "Miss Monroe," he greeted her. "How's the boy doing?" "Much better," she replied, shaking out one of Mr. Hollister's shirts before pinning it to the line. "Dr. Pearson visited yesterday and says his lungs are clear. He's still weak, but improving every day." Finn nodded, seemingly relieved. "Good to hear." He shifted his weight, uncharacteristically hesitant. "I was wondering, that is, if Samuel's up to it. I thought he might like to see the new foal that was born last night. First one of the season." The unexpected offer surprised Dahlia. "I'm sure he'd love that. He's been watching the horses from the porch and asking questions about them." A brief smile lightened Finn's features. "Boys got good taste. Horses are the finest creatures on God's green earth." He replaced his hat. "I can bring him down to the stables after dinner if that suits." "That would be wonderful, thank you." As promised, after the evening meal, Finn appeared at the house. Samuel, who had been told about the planned excursion, was waiting eagerly on the porch, his excitement lending color to his previously pale cheeks. "You ready to meet Miss Starlight and her new colt?" Finn asked him. Samuel nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, sir. You're welcome to join us, Miss Monroe," Finn added, glancing at Dahlia. She hesitated, not wanting to intrude on what could be a special moment for her son, but Samuel looked at her hopefully. "Please come, Mama." With a smile, she nodded. "I'd like that." Finn surprised her by scooping Samuel up and setting him on his shoulders, the boy giggling with delight at his new vantage point. Together they walked to the stables, Samuel chattering excitedly, while Finn answered his questions with unexpected patience. The mare and her foal were in a spacious stall bedded with fresh straw. The colt, spindly-legged and curious, peered at them from behind its mother's protective form. "He's beautiful," Dahlia breathed, admiring the foal's gleaming chestnut coat, so similar to his mother's. "Can I touch him?" Samuel asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Not just yet," Finn replied, setting the boy down carefully. "He's still getting used to the world. But in a few days, when he's steadier on his feet, you can help me brush him if you'd like." Samuel's face lit up. "Really? I can help." "Sure can. Every horse needs a friend who takes special care of them." Finn glanced at Dahlia. "If it's all right with your ma, of course." The look that passed between them held something more than a simple request for permission or recognition, perhaps of shared concern for Samuel's happiness. "Of course it's all right," Dahlia said softly. They stayed at the stables until dusk, with Finn showing Samuel the other horses and explaining their care in terms the boy could understand. As the sun began to set, painting the western sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, they walked back to the main house. Samuel, tired but happy, leaned against Dahlia's side. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," the boy said earnestly. "That was the best day ever." A genuine smile transformed Finn's usually solemn features. "Call me Finn, partner, and you're welcome." That night, as Dahlia tucked Samuel into bed, he asked sleepily, "Mama, can we stay here forever?" The innocent question caught her off guard. "We're here until you're fully recovered, at least," she answered carefully. "And as long as Mr. Hollister needs my help." "I hope that's forever," Samuel murmured as he drifted toward sleep. "I like it here, and I like Finn. He doesn't talk to me like I'm a baby." Long after Samuel had fallen asleep, Dahlia sat by the window, pondering her son's words. The truth was, she was growing fond of Double Creek herself. The work was hard but satisfying, the people kind. And Finn. She found her thoughts returning to him more often than she cared to admit. There was something about the quiet cowboy that drew her, not just gratitude for his rescue of Samuel, but an awareness of the man himself. The gentleness that belied his rugged exterior. The way his rare smiles transformed his face. The respect he showed to everyone, from Mr. Hollister down to the youngest stable boy. But attachments were dangerous things, she reminded herself. Life had taught her that lesson all too well. For now, she would focus on Samuel's recovery and earning their keep at Double Creek. The future would have to take care of itself. The following weeks saw Samuel regain his strength rapidly. True to his word, Finn began including the boy in simple stable chores, teaching him how to brush the horses and helping him feed the new foal, which had been named Starfire. Under Finn's patient guidance, Samuel blossomed, his natural affinity for animals obvious to everyone. Dahlia, meanwhile, proved herself invaluable in the kitchen and household. Mrs. Abernathy, whose arthritis had been making her duties increasingly difficult, declared Dahlia a godsend to Mr. Hollister. "The place hasn't run this smoothly in years," the housekeeper confided one evening as they finished the dinner dishes. "And the men haven't eaten this well since Mrs. Hollister was alive. God rest her soul." "I'm happy to help," Dahlia replied sincerely. "Everyone has been so kind to us." Mrs. Abernathy's shrewd eyes studied her. "Especially Finn Blackwood, I've noticed." Dahlia felt heat rise to her cheeks. "He saved Samuel's life. We owe him a great deal." The older woman hummed skeptically. "And I suppose that's why he's been finding reasons to come to the house 3 times a day instead of his usual once? Or why you always seem to have biscuits ready right when he's passing by?" "Mrs. Abernathy," Dahlia protested, but there was no real indignation behind it. The housekeeper only chuckled and patted her arm. "It's good to see, that's all I'm saying. That man's been alone too long. And so have you, I'd wager." Before Dahlia could formulate a response, Samuel burst into the kitchen, his face alight with excitement. "Mama! Finn's taking some of the men to the north pasture tomorrow to check the fences, and he said I could come if you say it's all right. Please, can I go?" Dahlia hesitated. Samuel was much stronger now, but a full day's ride still seemed like a lot for a boy who'd been so ill. "I don't know, Samuel. It sounds like a long day." "Please, Mama?" Finn said I could ride Daisy, she's really gentle. And he promised I could help. The eagerness in her son's eyes was hard to resist. Still, she worried. "Let me speak with Finn first." As if summoned by her words, Finn appeared in the kitchen doorway, hat in hand. "Evening, Mrs. Abernathy." "Miss Monroe." His eyes moved to Samuel. "I see the scout has delivered my message." Mrs. Abernathy smiled knowingly. "I'll just go check on Mr. Hollister's evening tea," she said, making a rather obvious exit. When she had gone, Dahlia turned to Finn. "Samuel tells me you've invited him on tomorrow's fence-mending expedition." Finn nodded. "Yes, madam. Thought the boy might enjoy the ride, and it's not strenuous work. We'll be back before sundown." He hesitated, then added, "You'd be welcome to join us too. Mrs. Abernathy mentioned you're a fair hand with a horse yourself." The invitation surprised her. "Oh, well, I haven't ridden much since." She trailed off, memories of rides with her late husband briefly dimming her smile. Understanding flickered in Finn's eyes. "No pressure, but the offer stands if you'd like to come along. Be good for both of you to get some fresh air away from the house." Something in his steady gaze made Dahlia reconsider. Perhaps it was time to create new memories, for both herself and Samuel. "Actually, I think I would like that, if Mrs. Abernathy can spare me for the day." Samuel whooped with joy, and even Finn's usually reserved expression brightened considerably. "We'll leave after breakfast, then. I'll have Daisy and Willow saddled for you both." The next morning dawned clear and mild, a perfect spring day for a ride. Dahlia dressed in her most practical skirt and a sturdy blouse, her hair braided and pinned securely under a wide-brimmed hat Mrs. Abernathy had insisted she borrow. Samuel could barely contain his excitement as they ate a quick breakfast. Finn and two other ranch hands, brothers named Tom and Jesse Walker, waited for them by the corral with 5 saddled horses. "This here's Daisy," Finn told Samuel, leading forward a dappled gray mare with gentle eyes. "She's steady as they come." For Dahlia, he presented a chestnut mare named Willow. "She's spirited but responsive. Thought she'd suit you." The assessment surprised Dahlia. "How did you know what kind of rider I am?" A hint of a smile touched Finn's lips. "Just a hunch." As they rode out, the rising sun bathed the landscape in golden light. The north pasture lay several miles from the main ranch, and the ride took them through flowering meadows and alongside the creek that gave the ranch its name. Samuel rode between Dahlia and Finn, clearly delighting in the adventure. The Walker brothers rode ahead, occasionally pointing out wildlife or interesting features of the ranch to the boy. "You've got a fine son," Finn said quietly to Dahlia as they crossed a shallow part of the creek. "Smart, observant, asks good questions." "Thank you," she replied, warmed by the genuine compliment. "He's always been curious about everything." His father was the same way. Finn nodded, seeming to understand her need to acknowledge her late husband. "Must be hard, raising him alone." "It is," Dahlia admitted, "but he's worth every struggle." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creaking of saddle leather and the steady rhythm of hoofbeats. Dahlia found herself relaxing into the ride, enjoying the feel of being on horseback again and the beauty of the spring green landscape. "Can I ask what happened?" Finn ventured eventually. "To your husband, I mean, if it's not too painful to speak of." Dahlia took a deep breath, the familiar ache of loss present, but somehow less sharp in the open air of this peaceful place. "Mining accident. Silver Creek mine 3 months ago. There was a cave-in." She glanced at Samuel, making sure he was still chatting happily with Tom Walker and out of earshot. "James always said that mine was unsafe, but the pay was better than what we could make farming our claim." Finn's expression darkened. "Silver Creek's got a bad reputation. Hollister won't let any of his men moonlight there anymore. Not after what happened to Pete Sanders last year." "We were trying to save enough to buy cattle for our homestead," Dahlia continued. "Start a small herd. That was James's dream. But after he died, I couldn't maintain the place alone. The well dried up, and then Samuel got sick." She trailed off, the memory of those desperate days still too fresh. "Life out here doesn't leave much room for error," Finn said quietly. "One bad season, one accident, and everything can change. The understanding in his voice told Dahlia he spoke from personal experience. "Have you been with Double Creek long?" she asked, curious about this man who had so unexpectedly altered their lives. 5 years, he replied. Came west from Missouri after the war. Drifted for a while, worked ranches from Texas to Montana. He adjusted his hat against the sun. Double Creek's the first place that felt worth staying. There was more to the story, Dahlia sensed, but she didn't press. Everyone on the frontier carried pieces of their past they preferred not to examine too closely in the light. They reached the north pasture by mid-morning. While the Walker brothers began checking and repairing the fence line, Finn showed Samuel how to test the strength of the posts and identify areas that needed attention. Dahlia watched them together, struck by the natural way Finn interacted with her son, neither condescending nor impatient, but treating him with the same respect he'd show any fellow worker. Samuel flourished under the attention, eager to prove himself useful. They ate a simple lunch of bread, cheese, and dried apple slices in the shade of a large cottonwood tree. The Walker brothers entertained them with stories of ranch mishaps and cattle drives, making Samuel laugh with their good-natured bickering. As the day progressed, Dahlia found herself watching Finn when he wasn't looking the confident way he sat his horse, the strength in his hands as he worked the fence wire, the rare but transformative smile that appeared when Samuel said something amusing. There was something compelling about him, a steadiness that seemed increasingly rare in a world where fortunes could change in an instant. They were almost finished with the fence repairs when Tom Walker called out a warning. "Riders coming. 3 of them from the east." Finn immediately straightened, his hand moving to rest near his holstered pistol as he scanned the horizon. "Get behind me," he said quietly to Dahlia and Samuel. The approaching riders came into view, dust rising from their horses' hooves as they approached at a steady pace. As they drew closer, Finn's posture relaxed slightly. "It's just Ed Simmons and his boys from the neighboring spread," he told Dahlia. "Nothing to worry about." The riders pulled up a respectful distance away, and the oldest man, grizzled and weathered, raised a hand in greeting. "Afternoon, Blackwood. Everything all right over Double Creek Way?" "Just fine, Simmons," Finn replied. "Checking fences. How are things at Broken Spur?" "Can't complain. Calving's going well." Simmons's gaze moved to Dahlia and Samuel with undisguised curiosity. "Don't believe I've met your friends." Finn made the introductions. "Miss Dahlia Monroe and her son Samuel. They're staying at Double Creek. Miss Monroe's helping Mrs. Abernathy with the household." Simmons touched the brim of his hat. "Madam." "Young sir." His eyes lingered on Dahlia a moment longer than necessary. "Hollister's a lucky man to have such a pretty new housekeeper." Something in his tone made Dahlia uncomfortable, though his words were innocuous enough. Beside her, she felt Finn stiffen slightly. "We should be heading back," Finn said, his voice cooler than before. "Losing daylight soon." Simmons smirked but nodded. "Of course. Give my regards to Hollister." With a final assessing look at Dahlia, he and his sons rode off. "Who was that?" Dahlia asked once they were out of earshot. "Ed Simmons. Owns Broken Spur Ranch to the east. Decent cattleman but not always the best neighbor." Finn's jaw was tight. Best to be cordial but cautious with him. The Walker brothers exchanged a look that suggested there was more to the story, but neither elaborated. The encounter had cast a brief shadow over the otherwise pleasant day, and Finn seemed eager to put distance between them and the Broken Spur riders. As they packed up their tools and prepared to head back to the ranch, Samuel yawned widely, the day's activities finally catching up to him. "Tired, partner?" Finn asked with a gentle smile. Samuel shook his head stubbornly. "No, sir. I can ride all the way back." "I know you can, but how about you ride with me? Give Daisy a rest." Without waiting for an answer, Finn lifted Samuel onto his own horse before mounting behind him. "You can tell me which birds you've spotted today." Dahlia mouthed a silent thank you to Finn over her son's head. The thoughtful gesture allowing Samuel to save face while ensuring he wouldn't fall asleep and tumble from his saddle touched her deeply. The ride back was quieter, with Samuel eventually nodding off against Finn's chest despite his best efforts to stay awake. Dahlia rode alongside them, occasionally catching Finn's eye over her sleeping son. Something unspoken passed between them in those glances, a shared concern for Samuel. Yes, but something more as well. The sun was low in the sky when they reached the ranch, painting the buildings in warm golden light. Finn carefully dismounted with Samuel still cradled against him. "I can take him," Dahlia offered, but Finn shook his head. "I've got him. You must be tired yourself." Together they walked to the house, Finn carrying Samuel as if he weighed nothing. At the foot of the stairs, he paused, reluctance evident in his expression as he prepared to hand the sleeping boy over. "Thank you for today," Dahlia said softly. It meant the world to him. Finn's gaze met hers, something vulnerable flickering in its depths. "To me as well." He carefully transferred Samuel to her arms. "Good night, Miss Monroe." "Dahlia," she corrected impulsively. "Please call me Dahlia." A smile touched his lips. "Good night, Dahlia." As she carried Samuel upstairs, she could feel Finn's eyes following them, and the warmth that spread through her had nothing to do with the physical exertion of the day. The weeks that followed saw a subtle but unmistakable shift in the relationship between Dahlia and Finn. What had begun as gratitude and neighborly concern deepened into something neither of them seemed ready to name, but both increasingly relied upon. Finn found reasons to visit the main house more frequently, often bringing small gifts for Samuel: a carved wooden horse, interesting rocks from the creek bed, a hawk feather found on the range. For Dahlia, his offerings were more subtle. The first wildflowers of spring placed on the kitchen windowsill, a book of poetry borrowed from Mr. Hollister's library that he thought she might enjoy, a particularly fine piece of leather he'd saved for her to mend her worn boots. Samuel, for his part, had developed a case of unabashed hero worship. Each morning he asked if Finn might need help with any chores, and his face lit up whenever the cowboy appeared. Under Finn's patient tutelage, Samuel learned to ride with increasing confidence, help with simple ranch tasks, and even throw a lasso, though his target was usually a fence post rather than a calf. "You're good with him," Dahlia remarked one evening as she and Finn sat on the porch after dinner. Samuel had been put to bed, and the household had settled into the quiet rhythms of night. Finn looked uncomfortable with the praise. "He's a good kid. Makes it easy." "Not everyone has the patience you do," she persisted, "or the kindness." He was silent for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "I had a younger brother once," he finally said, his voice low. "Billy. He'd be about Samuel's age now if he'd lived." Dahlia's heart constricted at the pain evident in those simple words. "I'm sorry," she said softly. "What happened?" Finn's hands tightened on the arms of his chair. "Fever took him. During the war, when medicines were scarce and doctors scarcer. I was away fighting, couldn't get home in time." The words seemed to be wrenched from him, each one carrying the weight of years of guilt. "By the time I made it back to Missouri, they'd already buried him. My mother too. Farm was lost to taxes." Understanding dawned on Dahlia. His immediate response to Samuel's illness, his unwavering commitment to ensuring the boy received medical care, it hadn't just been basic human decency. It had been the actions of a man determined not to witness another child lost to illness. "That's why you stopped for us on the road," she said quietly. "Why you were so insistent on getting Samuel to the doctor." Finn nodded once, sharply. "Couldn't ride past. Not again." Without thinking, Dahlia reached across the space between their chairs and laid her hand on his. His skin was warm and rough with calluses, and for a moment he went completely still at her touch. Then, slowly, he turned his hand to clasp hers, their fingers intertwining in the gathering darkness. They sat that way for a long while, neither speaking, the simple connection saying more than words could convey. When Finn finally stood to leave, reluctance evident in every movement, he raised her hand briefly to his lips in a gesture that belonged to an earlier, more courtly time. "Good night, Dahlia," he said, his voice husky. "Good night, Finn," she replied, her hand still tingling from the brush of his lips long after he had disappeared into the darkness. That night, as she lay awake listening to Samuel's steady breathing from the adjoining room, Dahlia allowed herself to acknowledge what she had been trying to ignore for weeks. She was falling in love with Finn Blackwood. The realization should have frightened her. She had lost so much already, and opening her heart again carried terrible risks. But instead, she felt a curious sense of peace, as if some part of her had always known this was where the road would lead when a dusty cowboy stopped to help a desperate mother and her sick child. The following Sunday, Mr. Hollister insisted that Dahlia and Samuel accompany the ranch household to church services in Silver Creek. It would be their first return to town since their arrival at Double Creek nearly 2 months earlier. "The boy's well enough to travel now," the rancher said over breakfast, "and folks in town have been asking about you both. Best to show your faces before the gossips get too creative with their stories." Dahlia agreed, though with some trepidation. She had grown comfortable in the routine of ranch life and the company of its inhabitants. The prospect of facing the curious stares and questions of townsfolk was less appealing. When Sunday morning arrived, she dressed Samuel in his best shirt, freshly laundered and mended, and put on her own good dress, a simple blue cotton that had seen better days but was clean and presentable. Her hair, usually braided for practicality, she arranged in a more feminine style, pinning it up at the back of her head. As she descended the stairs with Samuel, she found Finn waiting in the front hall, looking uncharacteristically formal in a clean white shirt and dark vest, his usually unruly hair slicked down with water. He stared at her for a moment before remembering his manners. "You look very nice," he said, the simple compliment clearly heartfelt. "Thank you," Dahlia replied, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks. "So do you." Samuel broke the moment by racing down the last few steps. "Finn, are you coming to church with us?" "Wouldn't miss it, partner," Finn assured him, though Dahlia suspected from Mrs. Abernathy's surprised expression that Finn's church attendance was normally less regular. They traveled to town in Mr. Hollister's wagon, a more comfortable conveyance than the one that had first brought Dahlia and Samuel to Double Creek. The spring morning was glorious, with wildflowers dotting the prairie and birds singing from every tree and fence post. As they approached Silver Creek, Dahlia felt a surge of gratitude as she remembered their desperate arrival just 2 months earlier. How different things were now, with Samuel healthy and herself employed, and her eyes drifted to Finn, who rode alongside the wagon, with new possibilities on the horizon. The church was a simple white clapboard building with a modest steeple, set on the edge of town. As they arrived, other wagons and riders were converging on the same spot, the community gathering for its weekly worship. Finn helped Dahlia down from the wagon, his hand lingering on hers a moment longer than necessary. Inside, the church was already filling with families and individuals from town and surrounding ranches. Dahlia noticed curious glances directed their way as Finn led them to a pew near the back, taking a seat beside her with Samuel on her other side. Just before the service began, Dr. Pearson spotted them and approached with a broad smile. "Miss Monroe, young Samuel. What a pleasure to see you both looking so well." Samuel beamed at the doctor who had saved his life. "I'm all better now, and I can ride a horse by myself." Dr. Pearson chuckled. "I can see that. You've grown, too." He turned to Dahlia. "You're looking well yourself, Miss Monroe. Ranch life must agree with you." It does, she confirmed. Everyone at Double Creek has been very kind. The doctor's knowing gaze moved to Finn, who had risen to stand beside Dahlia. I can see that, he said with a twinkle in his eye. Good to see you in church, Blackwood. Been a while. Finn ducked his head slightly. Yes, sir. Before more could be said, the minister called the congregation to order, and Dr. Pearson moved to his own seat, leaving Dahlia with the distinct impression that their developing relationship had not gone unnoticed. The service was simple but moving, the minister's words focusing on community and caring for one's neighbors. Dahlia found herself reflecting on how a chance encounter on a desperate day had led to her current circumstances, surrounded by people who had become almost like family in a remarkably short time. After the service, the congregation lingered outside the church, catching up on news and gossip. Dahlia found herself the center of attention as townsfolk approached to introduce themselves and inquire about her and Samuel. So you're the young widow Hollister took in? One matron said, assessing Dahlia with sharp eyes. Quite fortunate for you. Yes, Mr. Hollister has been very generous. Dahlia agreed, trying not to bristle at the implication that she was receiving charity rather than earning her keep. And I hear you've caught Blackwood's eye as well, the woman continued, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. He's quite the catch himself, you know. Not much for socializing. But he's got a good reputation and must have saved a tidy sum working for Hollister all these years. Before Dahlia could formulate a response to this rather forward observation, Finn appeared at her side, Samuel perched on his shoulders. Miss Monroe, he said formally, though his eyes held a warmth reserved for her alone. Mr. Hollister is ready to head back to the ranch whenever you are. The gossip's eyebrows rose at this clear demonstration of the relationship she had just been speculating about. With a knowing smile, she excused herself, no doubt eager to share her observations with others. Thank you, Dahlia murmured as they walked toward the wagon. That woman was rather direct. Finn's lips twitched. Mrs. Patterson considers herself the social arbiter of Silver Creek. Nothing happens that she doesn't have an opinion on. And what opinion was she sharing with you, Mama? Samuel asked innocently from his perch on Finn's shoulders. Dahlia exchanged a glance with Finn, who looked simultaneously amused and embarrassed. Just grown-up talk, sweetheart, she replied. As they prepared to leave town, a familiar figure approached their wagon. Ed Simmons, the neighboring rancher they had encountered while mending fences. He was dressed in his Sunday best, though his weathered face still carried the hard lines Dahlia had noticed during their first meeting. Hollister, he greeted the ranch owner. Fine day for worship. Simmons, Mr. Hollister replied with cool civility. Indeed it is. Simmons's gaze moved to Dahlia. Miss Monroe, pleasure to see you again. You're looking well. His attention lingered on her in a way that made her instinctively move closer to Finn. Thank you, Mr. Simmons, she replied politely but without encouragement. The rancher seemed undeterred by her reserve. I was wondering if you and your boy might like to visit Broken Spur sometime. Got a new thoroughbred stallion I'm mighty proud of. The boy might enjoy seeing him. Before Dahlia could respond, Finn stepped forward slightly. Samuel's been pretty busy helping with the spring calves at Double Creek, he said, his tone casual but his posture anything but. Doesn't leave much time for visiting. Something hard flashed in Simmons's eyes. Wasn't asking you, Blackwood. The tension between the two men was palpable. Dahlia placed a hand on Finn's arm, as much to steady herself as to calm him. Thank you for the invitation, Mr. Simmons, she said firmly. But as Finn mentioned, we've been quite busy at Double Creek. The use of Finn's first name and the clear alignment of herself with him wasn't lost on Simmons. His mouth tightened briefly before he forced a smile. Of course, another time, perhaps. With a tip of his hat that didn't reach his eyes, he moved away. Mr. Hollister watched him go with a thoughtful expression. That man never could take no for an answer, he murmured almost to himself. Then more loudly, let's head home, folks. Mrs. Abernathy's Sunday roast won't wait forever. The ride back to the ranch was quieter than the journey to town had been. Samuel, tired from the excitement, dozed against Dahlia's side. Finn rode alongside the wagon, his expression distant, as if his thoughts were troubling him. That evening, after Samuel had been put to bed and the household had settled for the night, Dahlia found Finn sitting alone on the porch steps, staring up at the star-filled sky. She hesitated in the doorway, unsure if he wanted company, but he seemed to sense her presence and turned. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked, making room for her on the step. Dahlia sat beside him, the night air cool against her skin. "Too much thinking," she admitted. Finn nodded as if he understood perfectly. For a while, they sat in comfortable silence, shoulders almost but not quite touching, the vast canopy of stars spread above them. "I should apologize for earlier," Finn finally said. "With Simmons. Wasn't my place to speak for you." Dahlia turned to look at him, surprised. "You have nothing to apologize for. I wasn't interested in his invitation." Still, Finn's profile was stern in the moonlight. "You're your own woman. Don't need me interfering." The declaration, with its clear respect for her independence, touched Dahlia deeply. How different from her late husband, who, for all his good qualities, had always assumed the right to make decisions for their family without consultation. "I appreciated your support," she said softly. "There's something about Mr. Simmons that makes me uneasy." Finn's jaw tightened. "You've got good instincts. Simmons isn't to be trusted, especially around women." The warning was clear, and Dahlia nodded her understanding. Another silence fell between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable, rather. It held the weight of things yet unsaid but increasingly difficult to ignore. "Dahlia," Finn began hesitantly, "I'm not good with words, never have been, but I need to say something, and I'd appreciate it if you'd let me get it all out before you respond." Her heart began to beat faster as she nodded. "Of course." Finn took a deep breath, his gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "When I found you and Samuel on that road, I was just doing what any decent person would do. Didn't expect anything to come of it beyond getting a sick child to a doctor." He paused, seeming to struggle with his next words. "But these past weeks, getting to know you both, it's changed something in me." He turned to face her then, his expression more vulnerable than she had ever seen it. "I know you've suffered a great loss, know that wound's still healing, and I know Samuel has to be your first consideration as he should be. But I find myself thinking about you both all the time, wondering if maybe someday you might consider. That is, if you could see your way to." He trailed off, frustrated by his own inarticulateness. Dahlia's heart felt too large for her chest. "Are you asking to court me, Finn Blackwood?" she asked gently. Relief flooded his features at her directness. "Yes, madam, I believe I am, if you're not opposed to the idea." In answer, Dahlia reached for his hand, twining her fingers with his as they had that night on the porch. "I'm not opposed," she said softly. "Not at all." The smile that transformed Finn's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, gradual at first, then radiant with possibility. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he leaned toward her. Dahlia met him halfway, and their lips touched in a kiss that was gentle but held the promise of deeper passion to come. When they parted, Finn rested his forehead against hers. "Been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted, his voice husky. Dahlia smiled, a happiness she had thought lost to her forever blooming in her chest. "Me too." The courtship of Dahlia Monroe and Finn Blackwood proceeded with a blend of frontier practicality and old-fashioned romance. There were no fancy restaurants or theaters in Silver Creek, but Finn found other ways to show his regard, bringing Dahlia wildflowers picked on the range, reading aloud to her and Samuel in the evenings, teaching her to shoot his revolver just in case, and carving a delicate wooden jewelry box for her birthday in June. For her part, Dahlia sewed him a new shirt, packed special lunches when he would be out on the range all day, and listened with genuine interest to his stories of cattle drives and the war years. Their relationship deepened with each passing day, built on a foundation of mutual respect and growing affection. Samuel took to the new arrangement with enthusiasm, already viewing Finn as something between a hero and a father figure. The three of them often rode out together on Sundays after church, exploring the far reaches of Double Creek Ranch or having picnics beside the creek. By midsummer, their courtship was the subject of good-natured teasing from the ranch hands and knowing smiles from Mrs. Abernathy. Mr. Hollister, for his part, seemed genuinely pleased by the development. About time Blackwood found himself a good woman, the rancher told Dahlia one evening as they sat on the porch after dinner. Man's been carrying a weight too long. You and the boy have lightened it considerably. The observation touched Dahlia deeply. He's done the same for us, she replied. I never expected to find this. When Samuel fell ill on the road that day, Hollister nodded sagely. Life has a way of providing what we need, even when it seems to be taking everything away. His gaze turned distant, and Dahlia knew he was thinking of his own lost wife and daughter. Not everyone viewed their relationship with such approval, however. Ed Simmons, whose initial interest in Dahlia had been rebuffed, grew increasingly cold whenever their paths crossed in town or at neighboring ranch functions. Dahlia tried to dismiss his sullen looks as mere wounded pride, but Finn seemed more concerned. Just keep your distance from him, he advised her after a particularly tense encounter at the general store in town. Simmons doesn't take rejection well, especially from women. Despite this minor cloud, the summer of 1871 was the happiest Dahlia could remember. Double Creek Ranch prospered. Samuel grew stronger and more confident by the day, and her relationship with Finn deepened in ways both expected and surprising. It was a perfect July evening when Finn asked her to marry him. They had ridden to a high meadow overlooking the ranch, leaving Samuel in Mrs. Abernathy's care for a rare evening alone. A picnic basket and bottle of wine luxuries Finn had purchased on his last trip to town sat between them on a blanket spread beneath a lone cottonwood tree. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in spectacular shades of orange and pink, Finn grew uncharacteristically quiet. Is something wrong? Dahlia asked, noticing his distraction. He shook his head, then reached for her hand. Nothing's wrong. Just nervous, I guess. Nervous? You? She teased gently. The man who faced down that angry bull last week without blinking? A smile briefly lightened his features before solemnity returned. This is more important than any bull. He took a deep breath. Dahlia, I've been thinking a lot about the future. About what I want for the rest of my life. Her heart began to beat faster as she recognized the serious intent behind his words. And what do you want, Finn? You, he said simply. You and Samuel. Family. A life together. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object that gleamed gold in the fading light. This was my mother's. Only thing I have left of hers. I've been carrying it since I found you both on that road, waiting for the right moment. He opened his palm to reveal a simple gold band with a small pearl set in its center. It's not fancy, he said, suddenly uncertain. I could get you something grander from the jewelry store in Denver. It's perfect, Dahlia interrupted, her vision blurring with tears. Absolutely perfect. Relief flooded his features. Then, will you marry me, Dahlia Monroe? Make a family with me? Let me be a father to Samuel and a husband to you for as long as we both shall live. The words, clearly rehearsed but no less heartfelt for it, brought tears spilling down Dahlia's cheeks. "Yes," she whispered, then more strongly, "Yes, Finn Blackwood, I will marry you." With hands that trembled slightly, Finn slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her, and the simple pearl caught the last rays of the setting sun. "I love you," he said, the words coming more easily now that the proposal was behind him. "Have since I don't know when. Maybe since I first saw you holding Samuel in your arms on that road, looking like you'd fight the devil himself to save your boy." Dahlia laughed through her tears. "I love you too, and I think Samuel will be overjoyed. He's been dropping hints for weeks about how nice it would be if you lived with us all the time." Finn's smile widened. "Smart kid." He leaned forward to kiss her, and Dahlia met him eagerly, her arms twining around his neck as the kiss deepened with the promise of their future together. They shared the news with Samuel the next morning. The boy's reaction exceeded even their expectations. "Does this mean Finn will be my pa now?" he asked, his eyes wide with excitement. "If that's something you'd like," Finn answered carefully. "I'd be honored to be your pa, but I know you had a father who loved you very much. I wouldn't want to replace him in your heart." Samuel considered this with the seriousness only a 6-year-old could muster. "I think my first pa would want me to have a new pa to take care of me and mama," he finally declared. "Especially a pa who can teach me to rope calves and shoot a gun when I'm bigger." Finn knelt to the boy's level, his expression solemn. "I promise to do my very best by you and your mama, Samuel, every day for the rest of my life." Samuel threw his arms around Finn's neck. "I love you, Pa," he whispered, testing out the new title. Watching them, Dahlia felt her heart might burst with happiness. From the depths of despair on that dusty road just months ago, life had given her a second chance at love and family. It seemed almost too perfect to be real. News of their engagement spread quickly through the ranch and nearby town. Mrs. Abernathy immediately began planning the wedding breakfast, while Mr. Hollister offered to host the ceremony at the ranch. The other ranch hands congratulated Finn with good-natured teasing and sincere well wishes. "About time you stopped mooning over the lady and made her an honest offer," Tom Walker joked, clapping Finn on the back. "Was starting to think we'd have to give you a push," his brother Jesse added with a grin. Only Ed Simmons's reaction cast a shadow over their happiness. When he heard the news at the general store in Silver Creek, his face darkened ominously. "Blackwood, is it?" he said to Dahlia, who had been shopping for fabric for her wedding dress. "Interesting choice for a widow with prospects. Could have done better for yourself and the boy." The insulting implication made Dahlia's cheeks burn. "I couldn't possibly do better than Finn," she replied coldly. "Now, if you'll excuse me." As she turned to leave, Simmons caught her arm. "Just remember, when he disappoints you, and he will, there are other men who'd be happy to step in." The threat underlying his words sent a chill down Dahlia's spine. She pulled free of his grasp. "Don't touch me again, Mr. Simmons. And don't speak of my fiancé that way." She left the store with her heart pounding, unsettled by the encounter. When she told Finn about it that evening, his expression hardened dangerously. "I should have a word with him," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "No," Dahlia said firmly, placing a hand on his arm. "That's exactly what he wants to provoke you. He's just a bitter man with wounded pride. He can't hurt us." Though Finn agreed to let the matter drop, she could tell he remained troubled by Simmons's behavior. For her part, Dahlia refused to let one man's spite dim the joy of planning their September wedding. The weeks leading up to the ceremony passed in a blur of preparations. Mrs. Abernathy and Dahlia sewed a simple but elegant wedding dress from ivory silk ordered from Denver. Samuel practiced his role as ring bearer with comical seriousness. Finn, with Mr. Hollister's blessing, began construction on a small house of their own on Double Creek property, not far from the main ranch house. "You'll still be my housekeeper, I hope," Mr. Hollister said to Dahlia. "At least until you and Blackwood start filling that new house with little ones of your own." The thought of expanding their family brought a blush to Dahlia's cheeks, but also a deep contentment. A year ago, she had been struggling to maintain a failing homestead with her first husband. Now she stood on the threshold of a new life, one filled with promise and security. The morning of the wedding dawned clear and mild, a perfect late September day. Dahlia woke early, too excited to sleep, and watched the sunrise from her bedroom window. Today she would become Mrs. Finn Blackwood, and their life together would officially begin. Mrs. Abernathy helped her dress and arranged her hair with sprigs of wildflowers. The wedding dress, with its modest neckline and delicate lace trim, transformed Dahlia from a practical ranch housekeeper into a radiant bride. "You look beautiful, my dear," the older woman said, blinking back tears. "Finn won't know what hit him." A knock at the door revealed Samuel, freshly scrubbed and uncomfortably formal in his new suit. His eyes widened when he saw his mother. "Mama, you look like an angel." Dahlia knelt to straighten his collar. "And you look very handsome, my love. Are you ready for your important job today?" Samuel nodded solemnly, patting the pocket where the ring rested. "I won't lose it, I promise." Another knock heralded Mr. Hollister, who had offered to escort Dahlia in place of her long-deceased father. The rancher's eyes softened when he saw her. "Miss Monroe, you're a vision. Blackwood's a fortunate man indeed." "I'm the fortunate one," Dahlia replied, meaning it with all her heart. The ceremony was to take place in the garden behind the main house, where late blooming flowers still added color to the carefully tended beds. As Dahlia approached on Mr. Hollister's arm, she saw that nearly everyone from the ranch and many townsfolk from Silver Creek had gathered to witness the occasion. And there, waiting for her beside the minister, stood Finn. He wore a new black suit and crisp white shirt, his usually unruly hair tamed for the occasion. But it was the expression on his face as he watched her approach that took Dahlia's breath away, a mixture of awe, love, and barely contained joy that mirrored her own emotions perfectly. When she reached him, he took her hands in his, and the rest of the world seemed to fade away. The minister's words, the responses they gave, even Samuel carefully presenting the ring, all passed in a blur of happiness. It was only when Finn gently placed the gold band on her finger beside her engagement ring and said, "I do," in a voice that carried to the farthest guest that reality snapped back into focus. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the minister declared. "You may kiss your bride." Finn needed no further invitation. His kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a fitting beginning to their married life. When they turned to face their friends and neighbors as Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood, the cheers and applause brought happy tears to Dahlia's eyes. The celebration that followed was joyous and relaxed, with abundant food, music from a fiddle and banjo played by two of the ranch hands, and dancing that continued well into the evening. Samuel, after performing his ring-bearer duties flawlessly, enjoyed being the center of attention among the female guests, who cooed over the poor, sweet boy who had found a new father. It was during a quiet moment, as Dahlia stood watching the dancers, that she noticed a figure at the edge of the gathering, Ed Simmons, uninvited but apparently unwilling to miss the event. He raised his glass in her direction, his expression unreadable in the gathering dusk, then turned and disappeared into the darkness. The brief sighting sent a chill through her, but she pushed the feeling aside. Today was too perfect to be marred by one man's spite. As the party wound down, Finn found her talking with Dr. Pearson. "Ready to see our new home, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his use of her new name sending a thrill through her. The house Finn had built for them was simple but solid, with 2 bedrooms, a comfortable living area, and a kitchen that made Dahlia's heart sing after years of cooking in cramped quarters. Though not entirely finished, some interior walls still needed plastering, and furniture was sparse. It was unmistakably a home built with love and care. "It's perfect," Dahlia whispered, turning to embrace her new husband. "Absolutely perfect." Samuel explored every corner with excitement, especially the bedroom Finn had designed specifically for him, complete with a window seat overlooking the creek. "This is really our house?" he asked, wonder in his voice. "Forever. Forever," Finn confirmed, ruffling the boy's hair. "But tonight you're staying with Mrs. Abernathy in the main house. Remember? She's promised you pancakes for breakfast." Samuel's face fell slightly before brightening at the mention of his favorite breakfast. "And then I'll come home tomorrow?" "First thing after breakfast," Dahlia promised, smoothing his hair back into place. "Now give us both a hug and be good for Mrs. Abernathy." After Samuel had been escorted back to the main house by one of the ranch hands, Dahlia and Finn found themselves truly alone for the first time as husband and wife. Standing in the center of their new home, surrounded by the evidence of Finn's labor and care, Dahlia felt a wave of emotion so powerful it brought tears to her eyes. "Are you crying?" Finn asked, alarmed. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong," she assured him, wiping her eyes. "I'm just so happy. A year ago I thought my life was over. And now," she gestured to the house around them, to him, to all that they had built together. "Now I have everything I could ever want." Understanding softened Finn's features. He stepped closer, gathering her into his arms. "Not quite everything," he murmured against her hair. "But we have time for the rest." The implied promise of children, of expanding their family beyond the three of them, brought a fresh wave of emotion. "Yes," she agreed, lifting her face to his. "We have all the time in the world." His kiss was different this time, deeper, with an urgency that had been held in check during their courtship. Dahlia responded in kind, her arms twining around his neck as the last barriers between them began to fall away. Later, much later, as they lay tangled together in the new bed Finn had built with his own hands, Dahlia traced the scars on her husband's chest, souvenirs of his time in the war and his years as a cowboy. "Happy?" he asked, his voice a low rumble in the darkness. "Completely," she assured him, pressing a kiss to his shoulder. "And you?" His arms tightened around her. "More than I ever thought possible." As they drifted toward sleep, Dahlia reflected on the strange, winding path that had led her to this moment. The grief and hardship, the desperate journey with a sick child, the chance encounter with a kind stranger on a lonely road, all of it had been necessary to bring her here, to this man and this life. "I love you, Finn Blackwood," she whispered against his skin. "And I love you, Dahlia Blackwood," he replied, the new name still sounding like a miracle on his lips. "Now and always." The days and weeks following the wedding settled into a comfortable rhythm. Dahlia divided her time between her duties at the main house and making their new home truly their own. Finn continued his work as Mr. Hollister's right-hand man, while also finding time to build furniture for their house and begin teaching Samuel the fundamentals of ranch work. Their life together wasn't without challenges. Adjusting to marriage after years of independence required patience and compromise from both of them. Samuel, though generally thrilled with his new family arrangement, occasionally struggled with the changes to his routine and the memory of his birth father. But these were the normal difficulties of blending lives and hearts, and they faced them together with honesty and love. By the time the first snow fell in November, the Blackwood household had become a place of warmth and laughter, a haven against the harsh realities of frontier life. It was a bitterly cold December morning when Dahlia first suspected she might be expecting a child. The signs were familiar from her pregnancy, with Samuel the slight nausea in the mornings, the unexpected fatigue, the tender fullness in her breasts. She kept the suspicion to herself for several weeks, wanting to be certain before sharing the news with Finn. On Christmas Eve, as they sat before the fire in their cozy home after Samuel had gone to bed, she finally decided the time was right. "I have an extra gift for you," she said, taking Finn's hand and placing it on her still flat stomach. "But it won't arrive until next summer." It took a moment for understanding to dawn in his eyes. When it did, his expression transformed from confusion to wonder. "A baby? Are you sure?" Dahlia nodded, her eyes filling with happy tears. "Quite sure. I'm about 2 months along, I think. The baby should come in July." Finn gathered her into his arms, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "A baby?" he repeated, his voice filled with awe. "Our baby." They shared the news with Samuel the next morning after he had opened his Christmas presents. The boy's reaction was a mixture of excitement and confusion. "Where will the baby sleep?" he asked practically. "And will it be a brother or a sister?" "We don't know yet if it's a boy or a girl," Dahlia explained. "And the baby will sleep in our room at first, then eventually have a room of their own. But that won't be for quite some time." Samuel considered this information seriously. "I think I'd like a brother," he finally declared. "But a sister would be all right too, I suppose." Finn ruffled the boy's hair affectionately. "Very generous of you, partner. And either way, you'll be a big brother. That's an important job." The idea of responsibility clearly appealed to Samuel. "I'll help take care of the baby," he promised. "And teach them things, like you teach me." The simple statement brought a lump to Dahlia's throat. Despite his young age, Samuel understood the essence of family, the sharing of knowledge and care, the binding together of lives. As winter gave way to spring, Dahlia's condition became increasingly evident. The women of Silver Creek and neighboring ranches, upon learning of her pregnancy, showered her with advice, hand-me-down baby clothes, and offers of assistance after the birth. Even Mrs. Abernathy, who had initially been concerned about how Dahlia's pregnancy would affect her household duties, became an enthusiastic supporter, knitting tiny blankets and caps in her spare time. Finn, for his part, responded to the news of impending fatherhood with a mixture of joy and protective concern that Dahlia found endearing. He insisted on taking over her heavier chores, built a cradle for the baby with his own hands, and developed the habit of placing his palm on her growing belly each night to feel the child's movements. "Still can't believe we made this," he whispered one night as they lay in bed, his hand resting on the firm curve of her stomach where their child performed its nightly acrobatics. "A whole new person who's half you and half me." Dahlia covered his hand with her own. "Incredible, isn't it? Like a miracle." The peaceful moment was broken by a particularly energetic kick from the baby. Finn chuckled. "Strong, like its mama. And stubborn, like its papa," Dahlia countered with a smile. Life seemed perfect, their family growing, their home established, their future secure. But as spring progressed, troubling rumors began to circulate about Ed Simmons and his Broken Spur Ranch. Tales of rustled cattle, intimidated neighboring homesteaders, and hired guns brought in from Texas reached Double Creek through the ranch hands' connections in town. "Simmons is expanding his operation," Mr. Hollister explained grimly one evening when he invited Finn and Dahlia to dinner at the main house. "Buying up land where he can, pressuring folks to sell where he can't." "Has he approached you?" Finn asked, his expression concerned. The older rancher nodded. "Made an offer last month for our north section. I declined, of course. Double Creek's been in my family too long to start selling it off piecemeal." "And how did he take the refusal?" Dahlia asked, sensing there was more to the story. Hollister's face hardened. "Not well. Implied that a man of my age might find it difficult to manage such a large operation. Suggested I consider my legacy." The word clearly held a particular sting for the childless widower. Finn's jaw tightened. That's close to a threat. Close enough, Hollister agreed. I've doubled the night riders along the north boundary. Simmons has never been above helping himself to other ranchers' stock. The conversation cast a shadow over what had been a pleasant evening. As they walked back to their house under a star-filled sky, Dahlia could feel the tension in Finn's posture. "You're worried?" she observed, slipping her hand into his. He squeezed her fingers gently. "Just being cautious. Simmons has never liked me much, and now he has a grudge against Hollister too. Best to stay alert." The warning proved prescient. Within a week, 2 of Double Creek's horses disappeared from the north pasture. The tracks led directly toward broken spur land before disappearing in rocky terrain. "Not much doubt who took them," Tom Walker reported to Finn after following the trail as far as he could. "But no proof either." More incidents followed a section of fence cut, allowing cattle to wander onto broken spur grazing land, where they were then claimed as strays. A mysterious fire in one of the hay barns that was fortunately discovered and extinguished before it could spread. Threatening notes left for some of the hands when they visited the saloon in town. Through it all, Finn maintained a vigilant but measured response. Extra guards were posted. Ranch hands traveled in pairs when going to town. Mr. Hollister filed complaints with the county sheriff, though little came of them without concrete evidence. Dahlia tried not to let the situation affect her daily life, but as her pregnancy advanced and she became more physically vulnerable, she couldn't help feeling uneasy. Finn began to curtail his time away from the house, delegating more responsibilities to the Walker brothers so he could remain closer to home. "You don't need to hover," Dahlia told him one afternoon as she kneaded bread dough in their kitchen. "I'm pregnant, not helpless." Finn, who had been repairing a chair at the table instead of joining the hands for the day's cattle roundup, looked up with a rueful smile. "I know. But humor me. Simmons has been quiet lately, and that worries me more than his usual mischief." Dahlia had to admit he had a point. The lack of incidents in recent weeks could mean Simmons had given up his vendetta or that he was planning something more significant. Her thoughts were interrupted by Samuel bursting through the door, his face alight with excitement. "Pa, come quick. One of the Mares is having her foal." The miracle of new life temporarily pushed aside concerns about Simmons. The entire household gathered at the stable to witness the birth of a spindly-legged filly with a white star on her forehead. "She's beautiful," Samuel breathed, watching from a safe distance as the newborn struggled to her feet under her mother's watchful eye. "That she is," Finn agreed, his arm around the boy's shoulders. "Maybe she'll be yours to train when she's old enough." Samuel's eyes widened at the prospect. "Really? My very own horse?" "Really," Finn confirmed. "Every good cattleman needs a horse he can trust." As Dahlia watched them together, this man who had become such a wonderful father to her son, she felt a surge of love so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Pregnancy had made her more emotional, but this was more than hormones. It was gratitude for the family they had built and the life they shared. The peaceful moment was shattered by the sound of approaching hoofbeats, many of them, moving at speed. Finn straightened, instantly alert. "Get in the house," he told Dahlia and Samuel, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Now." Dahlia grabbed Samuel's hand and hurried toward their home, her heart pounding. Through the window, she watched as a group of riders approached the main ranch house, at least 10 men, with Ed Simmons at their head. Mr. Hollister emerged onto his porch, straight-backed and defiant despite being outnumbered. Finn and several of the ranch hands moved to stand beside him, presenting a united front. Though Dahlia couldn't hear the exchange, the body language told the story clearly enough. Simmons, gesturing expansively from his horse, was making some kind of proclamation or demand. Mr. Hollister, unimpressed, appeared to refuse whatever was being proposed. The tension was palpable even from a distance. Finally, Simmons turned his horse, clearly preparing to leave. But as he did so, he spotted Dahlia watching from her window. Even across the distance, she could see his expression change, hardening into something cold and calculating. He said something to Finn, who immediately stepped forward, his posture radiating controlled fury. For a terrible moment, Dahlia thought violence would erupt there and then. But Mr. Hollister placed a restraining hand on Finn's arm, and after a tense moment, Simmons and his men rode away. Finn strode toward their house as soon as the riders disappeared from view, his face grim. What did he want? Dahlia asked as soon as he entered. Same as before, trying to pressure Hollister into selling the north section. Finn's jaw was tight with suppressed anger. But this time he brought muscle to back up his request. And what did he say to you? I saw your reaction. Finn hesitated, clearly not wanting to upset her. Nothing worth repeating, he finally said. Just trying to get under my skin. But Dahlia knew him too well now to be deflected so easily. Finn, she said firmly. Tell me. He sighed, running a hand through his hair in frustration. He mentioned you. Said it was a shame such a fine woman was wasted on a hired hand when she could have been the wife of a landowner. His expression darkened further. Then he had the gall to ask how you were feeling. Said he'd heard about the baby and hoped you were well. The implicit threat in Simmons's solicitous words made Dahlia's blood run cold. She instinctively placed a protective hand over her swollen belly. He won't come near you, Finn promised, seeing her fear. I won't let him. But they both knew that in the vast expanses of the frontier, where law was sometimes a distant concept and men like Simmons operated with virtual impunity, such promises were easier made than kept. The following weeks passed in uneasy vigilance. Finn rarely left the immediate vicinity of the ranch, and when he did, he made sure Dahlia and Samuel were safely at the main house under Mr. Hollister's protection. The other ranch hands took turns keeping watch, especially at night. Despite these precautions, Dahlia refused to let fear dominate their lives. She continued her usual routines, adapted now for her advancing pregnancy. She and Samuel planted a vegetative garden beside their house, with Finn building a fence around it to keep out rabbits. In the evenings, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, reading aloud from books borrowed from Mr. Hollister's library, or simply talking about their plans for the future. It was during one such peaceful evening in late June, with fireflies beginning to flicker in the gathering dusk, that Samuel asked a question that had clearly been on his mind. Pa, he said, leaning against Finn's knee as they sat on the porch steps. Are you afraid of Mr. Simmons? Finn considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. Not afraid exactly, he answered carefully, but I'm cautious of him. Men like Simmons, who are used to getting their way and don't care who they hurt to get it, can be dangerous. Samuel nodded, processing this information. Is that why you always make sure the door is locked at night now? And why you carry your gun even when you're just going to the barn? Yes, Finn admitted. I want to make sure you and your mama and the baby are safe. Samuel was quiet for a moment, then asked, what if he tries to hurt us? Dahlia, who had been listening from her rocking chair, felt her heart clench at the fear underlying her son's question. But before she could offer reassurance, Finn answered. Then he'd have to go through me first, he said simply. And that won't happen. The certainty in his voice seemed to satisfy Samuel, who nodded solemnly. Good, because I don't want anything to happen to our family. Nothing will, Finn promised, tousling the boy's hair. Now, I think it's about time for a certain young cowboy to get ready for bed. After Samuel had been tucked in and had fallen asleep, Dahlia found Finn on the porch again, staring out into the darkness with a troubled expression. You're worried, she said, easing herself down beside him. He didn't try to deny it. Simmons has been too quiet. It's not like him to make threats and then do nothing. Maybe he's reconsidered, Dahlia suggested, though she didn't really believe it. Or perhaps the sheriff warned him off. Finn shook his head. Sheriff Conway is a good man, but he's only one person with a lot of territory to cover. And Simmons has friends in the county government. He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. I've been thinking, maybe you and Samuel should go stay with your sister in Denver until after the baby comes. The suggestion took Dahlia by surprise. Leave? Finn, no. I'm not going to run away and leave you to face whatever Simmons might be planning. It's not running away, he argued. It's being sensible. You're due in less than a month. If something happened. Nothing will happen, she echoed his earlier assurance to Samuel. We face this together, as a family. I'm not leaving you. The stubbornness in her tone was matched by the determination in her eyes. After a moment, Finn sighed in defeat. You're the most hard-headed woman I've ever met, Dahlia Blackwood. And don't you forget it, she replied, leaning against his shoulder. Besides, Mrs. Abernathy would never forgive me if I had this baby anywhere but here. She's already planning to serve as midwife. The reminder brought a reluctant smile to Finn's face. That's true. I think she's more excited about this baby than we are. Not possible, Dahlia countered, guiding his hand to her belly where their child was performing its nightly acrobatics. No one is more excited than we are. As July arrived with blazing heat and afternoon thunderstorms, Dahlia found herself increasingly uncomfortable, but also filled with anticipation. The baby's room was ready, with the cradle Finn had built positioned near the window to catch the cooling breezes. Tiny clothes, some new and some handed down from friends in town, were folded neatly in a chest of drawers. Everything was prepared for the new arrival. On the morning of July 15th, Dahlia woke before dawn with a familiar tightening in her lower back. Having been through childbirth before, she recognized the early signs of labor. Rather than wake Finn immediately, she eased herself out of bed and moved quietly about the house, knowing there would likely be many hours ahead. By the time Finn and Samuel woke for breakfast, the contractions were still mild but definitely established in a regular pattern. Dahlia calmly informed them that the baby would likely arrive before the day was out. Finn's reaction was a comical mixture of excitement and panic. Now? Are you sure? Should I get Mrs. Abernathy? Do you need the doctor? Should you be standing? Dahlia laughed despite the discomfort of another contraction. Yes, I'm sure. Yes, please fetch Mrs. Abernathy. The doctor would be good but not urgent yet. And yes, I can stand walking actually helps at this stage. Samuel watched with wide eyes as Finn rushed to saddle his horse and ride to the main house for Mrs. Abernathy. Does it hurt, Mama? He asked worriedly. Some, Dahlia admitted, not wanting to frighten him but also not wishing to lie. But it's a purposeful kind of pain. It means the baby is getting ready to be born. This seemed to reassure him, and he set about helping her in small ways, fetching water, straightening the bed covers, and generally being the sweet, thoughtful boy she had raised. Mrs. Abernathy arrived within the hour, taking charge with the confidence of a woman who had assisted at countless births. She examined Dahlia, declared everything to be progressing normally, and sent Finn to town for Dr. Pearson. Not that we'll likely need him, she assured Dahlia. You've done this before and everything looks straightforward. But men feel better having a doctor around, and it keeps them out from underfoot. The labor progressed steadily throughout the morning. Dahlia walked when she could, rested when she needed to, and drew strength from the supportive presence of Mrs. Abernathy. Samuel had been sent to the main house to stay with Mr. Hollister, after extracting a promise that he would be informed immediately when his new sibling arrived. By early afternoon, the contractions were coming hard and fast. Dr. Pearson had arrived and confirmed Mrs. Abernathy's assessment that everything was proceeding normally. Finn, relegated to the hallway outside the bedroom, paced like a caged mountain lion. "For heaven's sake, Blackwood," the doctor finally said, poking his head out the door. "Either come in and hold your wife's hand or go outside and chop wood or something. Your pacing is making everyone nervous." Given the choice, Finn didn't hesitate. He entered the bedroom and took his place beside Dahlia, his steady presence giving her something to anchor herself to as the pain crescendoed. "You're doing beautifully," he murmured, wiping her forehead with a cool cloth. "So strong, my love."